In that music, the main aspect of variation lay in the preservation of a certain sequence of intervals by a display of that sequence of intervals interlocking, overlapping, and combining at various distances and in differing textures. The constant factor was the interval substance itself, and the variable factor were the harmonic propositions to which it gave birth. Sveling's piece was essentially vocal in its orientation, and it really reminisced about the Renaissance manner of linear craftsmanship. But there's another type of Baroque variation, and that is that which derives from what is called a ground bass figure, a sequence of notes which provide a foundation for a certain harmony which is constructed above them, but which don't necessarily become integrated as theme or as melody with the composition itself, in the sense that Sveling's motivic nucleus certainly did. And in contrast to Sveling's music, this principle tends to favor instrumental rather than vocal styles of composition. It's this principle of variation which Sebastian Bach employs in his famous Goldberg Variations, and I'm going to play now approximately 1/3 of that work. In fact, all 9 of the variations, which also happen to double as canons. It happens that every third variation in this 30-part work, variations 3, 6, 9, and so on, these variations keep up a constant imitative dialogue among their upper voices, and with each successive variation of this type, which are referred to as canonic variations, the interval between the voices that are used canonically widens. The first of these canons has no interval separation at all, and it's described as a unison canon. And the gap between the intervals in the imitative parts gradually widens throughout the work until in variation number 27, which is the last of these canons, it's widened to a gap of a 1/9, and this is the way it sounds. So, throughout all these canonic variations, the harmonic sequence of which they have to concur remains absolutely constant. It still pertains to those 32 notes which structure the bass harmonies. And despite all of the intricacies of this kind of texture, the canons are still designed so as to be responsible to the harmonic connotations of this 32-note sequence. And by being variative, both as a ground bass structure and variative as a linear canonic structure, this marvelous piece provides evidence of that two-dimensional texture, which was so singularly the Bach texture, that glorious fitting out of the new harmonic standards of his day with the majestic sonorities of vocal counterpoint, which belonged to an earlier era. So here are the 9 canonic variations from the Goldberg Variations, preceded by their theme.